In the world of combat sports, there are fighters, and then there are titans, men whose very presence bends the laws of strength and physics. These are the giants who once lifted mountains for sport and later brought that same monstrous power into the ring. Every step they take echoes like thunder. Every swing of their fists rattles bones and souls alike. When these strongmen enter the squared circle, the spectacle becomes something far beyond ordinary competition. It becomes a raw display of human destruction. What happens when the world's strongest men decide to swap iron for gloves, trading deadlifts for knockouts? The answer is an earth-shaking symphony of power, chaos, and broken dreams. Mario Pudzianowski, known to fans as the Dominator, was no ordinary man. A 5-time world's strongest man champion, he already stood at the top of the mountain of muscle. But mere titles weren't enough. After conquering the world of brute strength, Pudzianowski turned his gaze toward a new frontier, mixed martial arts. In that world, he would prove that his muscles weren't just for show. With fists like anvils and the rage of a charging bull, Pudzianowski didn't fight with grace or finesse. He fought like an avalanche that refused to stop until everything in front of him was buried. In May 2022, when tattooed brawler Mikhail Martella dared to stand before him, the air was electric with tension. At first, both men circled cautiously, but patience wasn't in Pudzianowski's DNA. Like a predator bored with its prey, he lunged forward, unleashing pure carnage. Martella, nicknamed Pitbull, turned out to be more of a trembling pup, overwhelmed by the storm bearing down on him. A low blow from the Polish powerhouse momentarily paused the battle, but when the fight resumed, it was clear that nothing could save Martella. One brutal strike later, he was sprawled out, his tattoos blending into the bruises as the medics rushed in to see if his color was from ink or impact. But Pudzianowski's hunger wasn't satisfied. He needed bigger prey. Matchmakers found him a challenge straight out of a nightmare, an undefeated African behemoth weighing over 350 pounds. The size alone made him look like a tank, but tanks don't matter when the ground beneath them collapses. As soon as the bell rang, the African giant charged forward, only to meet a thunderous right hand that cut the lights in his eyes. Pudzianowski didn't just win. He erased his opponent from consciousness, adding another swift knockout to his growing legend. Even members of martial arts royalty weren't safe. In 2015, a Gracie, yes, from the legendary Brazilian jiu-jitsu family, stepped into the cage with him. But Pudzianowski wasn't impressed by legacies or technique. He was a man who knew only the language of violence. After a few exchanges, one brutal hook turned Rollis Gracie's world upside down, his body crashing to the mat as if gravity itself had given up. The crowd roared as the Dominator stood over his fallen foe, his monstrous back glistening under the lights, a living monument to unrelenting power. Not every victim was from distant lands. When fellow Pole Marcin Nyman faced him in 2009, it was less a fight and more an execution. Pudzianowski's entrance alone was a spectacle, ripping his shirt apart before the bell, showing the world what unfiltered strength looked like. Once the fight began, he bulldozed through his opponent with savage efficiency. The referee had to intervene not for the rules, but for mercy, grabbing Pudzianowski's arm just to stop the storm. Years later, another Polish fighter, Łukasz Jarowski, would learn the same hard lesson. He had swagger, confidence, and an attitude that screamed arrogance. But when he tried to clown the Dominator, Pudzianowski grabbed him mid-kick and slammed him to the mat, feeding him elbows that would make a blacksmith flinch. When Jarowski refused to shake his hand afterward, Pudzianowski responded with righteous fury, delivering what could only be described as a crucifixion punch, leaving his opponent sprawled in defeat. The saga of strongmen didn't end with Pudzianowski. In another corner of the world, another giant prepared to make his mark. Half-Thor the Mountain Bjornsson, the Icelandic legend from Game of Thrones, swapped his world record deadlifts for the boxing ring. His rivalry with fellow powerhouse Eddie Hall was legendary. Both men had claimed the title of world's strongest man, but pride demanded a definitive answer. Their showdown was biblical, two titans colliding under bright lights, their punches echoing like divine thunder. Eddie struck first, sending Thor stumbling, but the Viking inside Bjornsson would not kneel. Regaining his balance, he unleashed his fury, turning the tide and proving why he was called the Mountain. After the dust settled, Thor wasn't done. Boxer Simon Vallely thought his experience would be enough to outmaneuver the strongman. But taunting a giant comes with a price. When Valali mocked Thor mid-fight, the Icelandic beast responded with relentless counterattacks, carving bruises into the boxer's skin like a sculptor chiseling stone. Even when the fight ended, Valali's body told the story. Every hit a lesson in humility. Not even seasoned professionals like Stephen Ward could escape unscathed. Against Thor, Ward tried to dance and dodge using speed against size. But with every step, every feint, the mountain closed in. Ward's punches landed, but Thor's chin was carved from granite. Once Thor awakened his inner Viking, the tide turned once again. The crowd roared as Ward was forced to survive the storm, and though the fight ended in a draw, everyone knew who had truly dominated. When arm wrestling champion Devin Larratt stepped up, his confidence was sky high. He had beaten Thor before, but not in a fight like this. Once the bell rang, Thor moved like a man possessed, tearing through Larratt's defenses. The arm wrestling legend barely lasted a minute before the referee mercifully stepped in, saving him from further devastation. Yet before both Thor and Pudzianowski, there was Bob Sapp, the original beast of the ring. Towering, terrifying, and unpredictable, Sapp was a living hurricane in human form. In 2002, he burst onto the kickboxing scene and turned it upside down. When he faced Dutch legend Ernesto Hoost, few gave him a chance. But that night, Sapp was unstoppable. His raw aggression overwhelmed the seasoned champion, sending shockwaves through the combat world. Even Mike Tyson, watching from ringside, was stunned by the sheer chaos Sapp unleashed. Sapp's reign of terror continued, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Fighters who underestimated him soon learned what true power felt like, but over time the flame began to fade. Rumors spread that he started throwing fights, his once feared name becoming a punchline. Still, at his peak, no one could deny that Bob Sapp was a phenomenon, an untamed force who made audiences believe in monsters. And then came Ivan Shtirkov, the Russian Hulk. Part warrior, part machine, and all violence, he carried the cold fury of Siberia in his veins. Every fight he entered ended the same way, his opponents broken, their spirits crushed beneath his relentless assault. Against UFC veteran Rico Rodriguez, Shtirkov showed no mercy. One punch and the veteran was reeling. Another, and he was crawling out of the ring to escape. Against Bigfoot Silva, the Russian Hulk proved that even the mightiest giants could fall. His strikes turned the ring into a battlefield, and his name became synonymous with destruction. By the time he faced Thiago Silva and Satoshi Ishii, even the bravest fighters knew what awaited them. They didn't step into the ring to win, they stepped in to survive. And most failed. The Russian Hulk's fists became the final word in their careers, delivering endings so brutal they bordered on myth. From Pudzianowski's savage elbows to Thor's Viking rage, from Bob Sapp's berserker fury to Ivan Shtirkov's cold efficiency, these men redefined what power looks like inside the ring. They proved that strength, when mixed with will, can be a weapon more devastating than any skill or style. And so, as the dust settles on another battlefield, one truth remains clear. When the world's strongest men trade steel for gloves, the ring itself trembles in fear. If you enjoyed witnessing the raw chaos of these titans colliding, tell us which fighter impressed you most. Who do you think was the most unstoppable force among them all? Don't forget to hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more incredible stories from the brutal and fascinating world of combat sports. The ring never sleeps, and neither do legends.